Okay, so welcome to the deep dive, and today we're going to be focusing on something that I know a lot of you are interested in.
It's
The most effective ways to learn English quickly, especially in 2025. And we're going to be drawing from a recent episode of SmartPodcast,
Right.
which featured host Harry and language expert Patrick.
Yes.
So we've been through that episode.
Yeah.
We've got some notes.
Absolutely.
And we're ready to share some of the insights that they had.
Yeah, so really breaking it down for you, the listener.
Yes.
So whether you are looking to use English for your career or just to enjoy like movies or music or,
Right.
just to kind of broaden your horizons in general, we want to give you the most up-to-date tips and strategies that are working right now in the real world.
Absolutely.
No more, old school methods.
Yeah, forget about that.
We're looking at what people are using today to get results.
That's it. So one of the things that really jumped out at me from the Smart Podcast episode was how the whole learning landscape is changing. It's not really about those long, drawn-out lessons anymore, is it?
No, not at all. And I think one of the biggest takeaways here is this whole idea of microlearning.
Okay.
So instead of sitting down for hours and going through these massive textbooks, it's more about getting these short, focused bursts of English, that you can fit into your day much more easily.
And they were talking on Smart Podcast about how even platforms like Instagram and TikTok are becoming these really great tools for this.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you're scrolling through your feed and then suddenly you see a quick reel explaining, some difficult grammar rule. Or maybe a TikTok breaking down, the latest slang. Yeah. I mean, it's incredible.
It's so accessible.
It is.
I mean, it's just right there. And it's not just, just because it's convenient.
Right.
Patrick was talking about the power of repetition.
Yes.
When you see these short bits of content, like you see it again and again, and it starts to stick.
Absolutely. It's almost like effortless learning in a way. You're not even, really trying to memorize it. Yeah. But just by seeing it over and over again, it starts to, make its way into your brain.
You absorb it.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's like hearing a song on the radio, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You hear it a few times, and then all of a sudden you're singing along.
You know all the words.
Yeah, you know all the words.
Hey.
Okay, so another thing that's really changing the game is AI. And I know that's like a big topic right now. Yeah. But it's really becoming part of so many different parts of our lives, and that includes language learning.
Absolutely.
So in 2025, how are people really using tools like ChatGPT and all these pronunciation apps that are popping up everywhere?
Yeah, well, I think what's exciting for learners now is that AI is becoming this really personalized practice partner. Right. For instance, for writing, you can use tools like ChatGPT to get feedback on things you've written. Okay. So let's say you write an email, or maybe even you're trying to write a story in English, right? You can put that into ChatGPT and it'll give you feedback on your grammar, your vocabulary, even your style.
That's amazing.
It's pretty incredible.
So it's like having a personal tutor, basically.
Kind of, an editor who's available 24/7.
And they were talking about pronunciation apps as well on Smart Podcast. Right. How are those working to help people?
Well, these apps are really like virtual pronunciation coaches. Okay. So they use speech recognition and phonetic analysis to really listen to how you're pronouncing words. Right. And then they can give you feedback in real time. Wow. So they can point out specific sounds that you might be having trouble with. Right. And then give you advice on how to say them correctly.
It's almost like having like a vocal coach right there in your pocket.
Yeah, exactly.
That's pretty amazing. What do you think is the biggest advantage of using AI for language learning?
Well, I think for a lot of people, it's the psychological benefit. Yeah. Because, a lot of people are nervous about speaking English.
Making mistakes.
Especially with native speakers. Yeah. So with AI, you can kind of practice in a judgment-free zone.
It just takes the pressure off.
Exactly. You can make mistakes. Yeah. You can experiment, and you don't have to feel self-conscious about it.
Yeah, so that makes sense. Let's talk about immersion for a second. Yeah. I mean, the old advice was always go live in an English-speaking country, right?
Yeah.
But that's not really an option for everyone.
Right. And thankfully, the digital world has given us so many ways to create that immersion without actually having to travel.
Absolutely.
I mean, when we look at the bigger picture, it's amazing how technology has really changed, how we learn languages.
It's incredible. And Harry and Patrick were talking about some specific ways to do that digital immersion, like simple things like watching Netflix with English subtitles.
Right.
Or, joining voice chats on Discord.
Yeah.
Maybe on topics that you're interested in.
Absolutely.
Or even playing online games where everybody's speaking English.
Right. I mean, all of these things allow you to experience the language in a really natural way. It's not just about memorizing vocabulary lists.
Right.
It's about seeing how English is used in real conversations. And I think, for you, the listener, maybe you're into watching streams on Twitch or maybe you're a gamer.
Right.
And these can be fantastic ways to just passively listen to native speakers or to actually practice your speaking skills, in a fun and engaging environment.
It's all about finding those ways that you actually enjoy.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And of course, they talked about podcasts, which is what we're doing right now.
Right.
So how do podcasts fit into this whole immersion idea?
Well, podcasts are great because they help you get used to the rhythm of spoken English.
Yeah.
How fast people speak, the intonation, the natural pauses, all of that. And by listening to podcasts, especially about topics that you're interested in, you start to pick up on these things without even realizing it. It's that passive learning again.
Exactly.
Another thing that I thought was really interesting was this idea of learning from real people, not just teachers.
Absolutely.
So it's not just about textbooks and classrooms anymore.
Right.
Why is that? Why is there this shift?
Well, because language is dynamic, right? It's always evolving.
Yeah.
And so while teachers are great for giving you the foundation in grammar and vocabulary,
your rules,
it's also important to see how people actually use English in everyday life.
In the real world.
Exactly.
And on SmartPodcast, they're talking about like following vloggers and comedians and even gamers.
Right.
So why are those kinds of people good to learn from?
Well, because they use what Patrick calls natural English.
Okay.
So this includes all the slang, the idioms, the casual expressions that native speakers use when they're talking to each other. And they gave that example of how are you versus sup man.
Yeah.
Which I thought was a really good example.
Right.
So it's not just about learning the perfect grammar from a textbook.
It's about learning how to actually communicate with people.
That's right.
So beyond sup man, what are some other examples of this natural English that we might, come across in videos or in podcasts and things like that?
Sure. So you'll hear a lot of what we call phrasal verbs.
Okay.
So instead of saying investigate, you might hear look into.
Okay.
Or instead of postpone, you might hear put off.
Right.
And then there are also lots of idioms and colloquialisms, which are, expressions that don't literally mean what they say.
Yeah.
So, for example, if someone says break a leg, they don't actually want you to break your leg.
Right.
They're wishing you good luck.
And the grammar in natural English is also often a bit less formal than what you might see in a textbook.
Absolutely. Yeah. So let's talk about something that I know a lot of language learners struggle with.
Okay.
And that's the fear of making mistakes.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's so common, and it can really hold people back.
It's that fear of saying something wrong and embarrassing yourself.
Yeah.
But what I found really interesting was that they were talking about this new kind of culture in language learning, which is a mistake-friendly culture.
Yes.
So what does that mean?
Well, it means that instead of seeing mistakes as like a failure, successful language learners are starting to see them as part of the process.
Okay.
It's like when you're learning to ride a bike.
Right.
You're going to fall off a few times.
You're going to get some scrapes.
Yeah, but that's how you learn.
That's how you learn.
And the same is true with language learning.
Yeah.
You know, you're going to make mistakes.
Right.
You're going to say things wrong, but it's okay.
It's okay.
The important thing is to keep practicing.
Keep going.
To learn from those mistakes.
Right.
And not to let the fear of making mistakes stop you from speaking.
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
That's really good. So the focus is not really about, you know, achieving perfect grammar,
right,
but more about being able to communicate and connect with people.
That's right. You know, it's about getting your message across, understanding other people, and mistakes are just, you know, a natural part of that journey.
Totally.
Yeah.
This next strategy I thought was really cool.
Okay.
It's about using English to learn other things that you're interested in.
Right.
So it's like sneaking in the language learning while you're doing something else.
Kinda, yeah.
So they call this content-based learning on SmartPodcast.
Yeah.
And they gave the example of like watching a cooking video in English.
Right.
Because you actually want to learn how to make that dish.
Exactly.
So how does that work? Like, how does that help you with your English?
Well, the idea is that, you know, if you're really interested in the topic, in this case, cooking, you're going to be more engaged and you're going to be more motivated to understand the language. So you're focused on learning how to make the dish, but at the same time, you're picking up new vocabulary, new grammar structures, all in a really natural way.
Because you need to understand it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know, you're not just memorizing words for the sake of memorizing them.
You have a purpose.
Yeah, you're learning them because you need them to understand something that you're genuinely interested in.
And that was a really interesting point that they made, that this is how native speakers use English all the time.
Absolutely.
It's not like we're constantly thinking about grammar rules when we're speaking or listening.
We're just using the language to do things, to learn things, to communicate with people,
to live our lives.
Exactly.
So it's about taking English and not just making it like this separate subject, but actually integrating it into your life.
Exactly. And that's what content-based learning is all about.
Yeah.
You know, you're not just learning English, you're living it.
You're living it.
Yeah.
This is all so helpful.
I'm glad.
So to kind of recap, what are the key takeaways here from everything that we've been talking about?
Sure. So we talked about the importance of microlearning.
Right.
Using short, focused bursts of content to learn English.
Okay.
We also talked about AI.
And how AI-powered tools can give you personalized feedback on your writing and pronunciation.
Yeah.
In a judgment-free way.
Okay.
We talked about digital immersion, how you can create an English-speaking environment without having to travel.
Absolutely.
And then, you know, we talked about the importance of learning from real people, not just from teachers. And really getting exposed to that natural English.
Okay.
And finally, we talked about embracing mistakes as part of the process and using content-based learning to make English a part of your everyday life.
Yeah. So what would you say is the most important advice that Patrick gave on SmartPodcast to people who are trying to learn English?
Well, I think one of the biggest things is consistency.
Okay.
You know, even if you can only spare 15 minutes a day, it's better to do a little bit each day
than to try to cram everything in once a week.
Okay.
And also, you know, try to find opportunities to actually interact with people.
Right.
You know, there are lots of online platforms where you can
like the voice chats that we were talking about.
Or maybe you can leave comments on videos or articles about topics that you're interested in. And most importantly, just try to have fun with it.
Have fun with it?
Yeah, you know, don't be afraid to make mistakes.
Right.
You know, laugh at yourself.
Yeah.
Learn from those mistakes and keep practicing.
Absolutely. And you know, just by listening to this deep dive, you're already taking a step in the right direction.
You are.
So that's great.
You know, and English is such a valuable skill in today's world.
It opens so many doors.
It does.
And the amazing thing is that, you know, technology is just going to keep changing and it's going to create even more opportunities to learn languages in new and exciting ways.
Absolutely.
So here's something to think about, you know.
Okay.
What would your ideal English learning environment look like? with all these new technologies that are coming out.
Yeah.
There's so much potential.
Absolutely.
So food for thought.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us for the deep dive.
Thanks for listening.